Yes, very important topic, and this is really kind of in Joe's ballpark. So I'll let him talk about this, but I think, for me, it's important to understand what accessibility means. I think we often see requirements say that the website's got to be WCAG 2.0 compliant, right?
Right.
And I think the market needs to be educated a little bit about how extensive an effort that is, and I'll let Joe talk about that a little bit more because we do have, plenty of experience with that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've helped our clients meet their requirements for accessibility, but it's a tough concept to unpack. I think it's kind of similar to the noise around CMS and DXP, right? There's a lot of buzzwords, a lot of terminology, and precision in wording is important. So often, what I'll see is conflation, for example, of Section 508, which has to do with, for example, wheelchair accessibility to venues conflated with WCAG's 2.0 guidelines for how to make a website accessible. And we'll see that commonly in RFPs or RFIs, for example. People are saying, I want it to be both of those things, but not necessarily having enough information to really unpack what they're asking for. And accessibility, as we had said before, is really an important aspect of a good and a great website. And it has to do with performance and expanding what is possible in terms of your audience. And from our point of view, accessibility really is just the right thing to do. Unfortunately, though, there's also a lot of pressure, I think, out there, in our world around. In effect, it's ambulance chasing. There's attorneys out there who are chasing organizations on accessibility, and there's a lot of litigation out there happening around it. If maybe there's another webinar on that, but it's really increased steeply in terms of the amount of lawsuits, and it's a really important topic. But if I go back to why it's important as a baseline because accessibility covers things like alt text. And alt text, if you don't know, is effectively an invisible caption to most users of your site, but it's a really important piece of accessibility information if you're navigating with, say, a screen reader, which the screen reader will pick up on that description and it will read it back to your end user. So for example, if you have difficulty seeing, you might be relying on that alt text to understand the content of the website. And that's just one example, but much of accessibility as it relates to websites is really about front end development. So for example, HTML and CSS code is really where a lot of those requirements are going to live. So for example, the alt text piece, that's going to be a front end developer who will kind of set that up for you. But there's a lot of other considerations like color contrast, for example, where having the right amount of contrast is important to make the text readable. But there's a lot of other considerations. If you were to take a look at the WCAG 2.0 or greater, because there's other versions of that out there now, you will see that there are hundreds of requirements. And that's the important part, I think, as far as like if you're thinking about making your website accessible, really consider what you're asking because it will expand the scope dramatically for your website project. And it's literally hundreds of things you would have to check. And it really impacts the front end pretty heavily. But the part a lot of people don't also realize is that it also impacts your content development. So for example, you have to caption all your videos to meet all of the checkboxes. That's one of the requirements. For some people, that's not feasible. So there's that balance there of what are we really asking for against what do we really need. And while I think WCAG 2.0 to get to the AAA level is really it's an inspirational, visionary thing to try to attempt. For a lot of organizations, it's just not feasible. So finding that balance between what you're asking for and what we actually can do is an important kind of step to consider. And like I mentioned, there's actually 3 different levels. There's A, double, and AAA, and the requirements increase with each. So again, this was more of a PSA just to kind of throw that out there. A great website is accessible, but there's a lot of considerations around it.